Uh-huh.
Hmm.
Okay, we are now recording.
Okay.
Okay, so what I'd like to do tonight is walk you through some preparation for your presentation of your Sandbox and ePortfolio. I'm going to walk you through 10 quick steps to get you prepared before your presentation, and then give you a little bit of a sense of what you can expect during your presentation.
Okay. Because that's intimidating. It does.
Yes. So I want to remind you that as someone who is new to building a sandbox, or maybe new to Canvas or new to online teaching, that you're not being held to the same standard as someone who's putting their course in for OEI review. But what we do want to see is that you're working toward that center category of alignment. And so we'll be drawing your attention to that. So here's step number 1. We want you to download the OEI rubric and do a self-check. So the OEI rubric is in multiple places in the course, but it's also in our final discussion. And I will be sending it out in an announcement tonight with the archive of this orientation as well, or this presentation as well. And my suggestion is that you download the rubric, and we've looked at it in little tiny chunks throughout the course. So go through the whole rubric and read through sections A, B, C, and D. And as you're reading through them, look to that center section of what makes your course exchange ready. And think through what you'll need to do in your full course in order to get your course up to that exchange ready level. And then any adjustments that you can make after reading through the rubric, then please go ahead and make those to your course. So for instance, on the first page of the rubric, when we get into the actual sections, not the title page.
Right.
Section A1 says, where have you placed your unit level objectives or goals? So have you put them at the beginning of the unit so that students can find them and understand them? And A2 says, are those clear? So are they written in language that your students can actually understand? So your course objectives are in your course outline of record, but they're not always written in the most student-friendly language. So have you taken that kind of institutional language and turned it into language that matters to your student and explains to them what they're going to be doing? And then finally, A3 says, are those unit level objectives aligned to your overarching course objectives? And so just in those first 3 bulleted points, you can ask yourself, in my content unit, where did I put my objectives? Have I stated them clearly? And are they aligned with the overarching course objectives? And if you've done those things, then you can move on to the next place in the rubric. So that rubric is really going to be a guiding document that helps you figure out what needs to be done now that you've done individual pieces in your course, to keep your course, that initial content unit, cohesive. So it's going to help you add in the glue. Okay, step number 2 is to take what we call the 10-10-10 challenge. And so what that is what will your students see in the first 10 minutes of your course? So we really want you to think through as if you were a brand new student. How have you greeted your student? How will they know what they should do from the very first time they enter your course? Let's take a closer look. We want you to put on your student shoes, enter your course as if you have never taken an online course before and don't know anything about Canvas. Look at your landing page or your home page and see how you've designed it. Did you design it wisely? There's several homepage options that you can choose from in Canvas. So did you choose the syllabus page? And if you did you provide enough information to let students know where they should start? Did you choose a content page? If you chose a content page, do you have enough information to help students start? Have you explained to them how they're going to start the course or what they're going to do in the first day or in the first week? Or do they have enough instructions that if they land on that page in week 9 or week 16, they'll still be able to get information from your course? So that first 10 minutes is really important because students are anxious. They're a little bit worried and nervous, and so they need really clear instructions in order to be able to start off on the right foot. The next part of the 10-10-10 challenge is to imagine what your students are going to do in the first 10 hours of your course. So if we're using the Carnegie unit in a 3-unit course, that first 10 hours is what they would do in the first week, essentially. So we're asking you to pay really close attention to your orientation unit. What do your students need to do the first week of your course? Have you explained that to them? Have you made it really clear about what you want them to do that first week? And what support have you provided for them? Is there a navigation video? Are there links to tutorials? Have you given them the tools that they need if they're new to online learning? And how will you let them know how to learn or navigate your course? So not just Canvas, but the way you're using Canvas. And really importantly, have you included all the policies they'll need in order to be successful in an online course? Sometimes when we're building our first online course, we take our face-to-face policies and we put them in our course without thinking about whether or not an online student can do it. So for instance, I've had online students who took a course online because they were homebound and couldn't leave their house. And so if you've told them that there's mandatory office hours or that they must go to the library, have you provided any resources or shifted your policies slightly so that someone who is not able to come to campus, or maybe someone who lives far away, will be able to complete your course? So we really want you to think about those face-to-face policies and how they may shift or be different for an online student. So look through that orientation unit, make sure that you have all of the instructions that the student actually needs to be able to complete the course successfully and to navigate from piece to piece in the course. I really want to remind you to go back to the OEI rubric and look at that, the entire rubric, to help you think through what your student is experiencing. But I also want to draw your attention to A9, which is instructions. And this is not talking about instructions for assignments. This actually says that your course design includes instructions for learners to work with content in meaningful ways. So for instance, if you have a video that you're saying, watch the video and do this. And explaining the purpose of external resources, for instance. So if you have a document or a website that you're explaining to them what they should be doing when they go to download the document, read the document, or go to another website. Okay, last part of that 10-10-10 challenge. We looked at the first 10 minutes of the course, the first 10 hours of the course, and then we really want you to think about the first 10 days of the course. So what will your students need to do in the first 2 weeks of your course? So as they're shifting from the orientation unit to a content unit, are you giving them instructions to let them know what they're going to do in the content unit? And have you given them enough kind of signposts in your course to let them know they're moving from one unit or one module into another? So have you built in those places that let them know that kind of time is passing in your course and that they moved from one unit to another or one module to another? So perhaps it's a content page that says, congratulations, you finished the orientation unit. Or wait a second, you're at the end of the orientation unit. Before you move on, make sure you've done this, this, and this. So building in those extra pieces that provide the instruction and the actual structure to your course is really important. So that's the 10-10-10 challenge, and that's the first 5 points out of 10 that we think will help you prepare your course to teach it and then also prepare you for the presentation. Number 6 is to think about your navigation. So when you look at your course, pretend that you're brand new to online learning. How will your students know how to navigate your course? Have you actually provided instructions for them? Do you have a navigation video? Or are you assuming that they'll be able to guess how to get through your course? Remember that every wrong click a student makes if they're looking for something raises their cognitive load. And so if they don't know where to go and they're clicking around for something, they may get frustrated very easily, and if they're frustrated early, they're going to maintain that frustration in your course. Also, have you provided enough instructions to help them learn your course? So even though we're all using Canvas, the course, a common course management system, we're all going to use it slightly differently. We may have different home pages, we may have different expectations for our students. And so you really need to give them written instructions, video instructions, images, to help them understand how you expect them to navigate the course. In my orientation unit, I tell my students on the first page, you will have to work through this unit in chronological order using the next button. It won't allow you to go through any other way. And if that's the case, then we want to let them know that. Otherwise, they're going to be confused about why they can't click around or jump around in the course. And then finally, do you provide enough access to tutorials? Have you taught your students how to access the Canvas guides, or have you inserted the Canvas guides? All of these things are really important to help your students learn how to navigate. One final piece. You may have noticed that the course navigation menu, that's the one that starts with the home button, is customizable. You can move things around so that the things that are most important to your course are at the top. And you can even remove things from that menu if you're not going to use them or if you don't want your students to see them. For instance, I never let my students see the course files because I have a lot of important files in there that I don't want students to see. I also don't allow them to see my individual pages. So I put my pages into a module, and that's how I want them to access them. So I hide both of those, the files and the pages, from my students. So my course is going to look a little bit different from someone else's course, and students who've taken a Canvas course before might start looking for the pages or start looking for the files thinking that's how they can access things. So it's my job to let them know how I'm using Canvas so that they don't get confused or frustrated. Number 7 has to do with section B of the OEI rubric. It's all about communication and interaction. And we think in your orientation unit, you should spend some extra time building policies and explaining to your students how you're going to interact and communicate with them. So let them know how you'll be responding to them. Will you respond to emails within 24 hours or 48 hours? Do you take the weekends off? And so they shouldn't expect an email from you on Saturday or Sunday. Let them know how soon you'll be grading work so that they know what your expectations are and can set their own expectations to match. And also, if you're not going to answer technical questions for them, if you're not comfortable, I mean, you're not required to be the tech guru at your campus. Have you let them know that you can't answer tech questions, or have you pointed them to maybe a service on your campus that can answer technical questions for them? And then finally, you need to ask yourself if you're using all of the tools of the CMS. This is part of both A and B. So we can communicate with our students through the discussion forums, through announcements, through the inbox, responses to student work, in feedback, and in rubrics. You want to make sure that you're using all of the tools of the course management system that are appropriate or applicable for your particular field of study. And so make sure that you're doing that. Explore all of the different ways that you can communicate with your students, and then also let them know. In section B, it actually asks if you've made your plan for communicating clear to your students. What this is asking you to do in your orientation unit, actually let them know. So B2 says, the instructor provides students with his or her plan to engage in regular effective contact using CMS communication tools that includes expected timeframes for responses or inquiries, discussion board posts, and feedback on assignments and assessments. So you really need to let your student know how you're going to be doing that. Number 8 focuses on your assessments. So we're asking you to look through your assessments and think about how you would explain how the assessments guide your students to a learning goal. So have you provided formative assessments that allow them to kind of test the water and learn some skills before they have to do a larger summative assessment? Are you building to that larger summative assessment? And can you explain how you'll provide feedback? Do you know how to use the speed grader tool, for instance? And are you planning to use both the rubric and commenting? How will you provide that feedback for your students, and when will you provide it? So really thinking through your assessments and looking through section C of the rubric to make sure that the way you're setting up your assessments aligns with the rubric. Number 9 is the big one, accessibility. Now, accessibility is overwhelming to many, many people. And if you look at the rubric, you'll see that there's multiple pages about accessibility in the rubric. We want to point out that the rubric is divided up into looking at web pages, so the content pages you're building in Canvas, documents, and then multimedia like video. So if we look at both the web pages that we're building, the Canvas content pages that we're building, anytime you're using the Canvas Rich Content Editor, which is in your assignment prompts, in your discussion prompts, in your announcements, in your content pages, on your syllabus page, all of those are places where you can use the Rich Content Editor. There's 5 things that you can do to make your rich content pages accessible. That's use headings, bulleted lists, numbered lists, alternative text with images, and meaningful links. And then there's one final thing that you can do for multimedia, and that's make sure that all of your video is closed captioned. So we'll hold closed caption for just a second. But if you look at those first 5, headings, bulleted lists, numbered lists, alternative text, and meaningful links, those are the same kind of tools or techniques to make something accessible, whether it's a web page or a document. So we think that those 5 kind of key components of making something accessible are something that every faculty should do out of a natural instinct, right? So it should become so much a part of the way that you write documents or write your content pages that you don't even pay attention to it anymore. It becomes natural. So we really want you to go through every single content page that you've made, every single assignment, announcement, discussion prompt, and make sure that you're using headings and that your heading levels go in order. So the title of the page in Canvas is always heading level number 1. And the first heading that you're going to be using on your page is heading level 2. If you have a subheading underneath that, it would be heading level 3. And make sure that your heading levels go in order like that. If you have bulleted lists, make sure that you're using the Rich Content Editor to make those bulleted lists and not using a dash or some other icon. And the same goes for numbered lists. And then finally, all images need to have alternative text. If it's just a decorative image, it's totally okay to just use 2 spaces instead of alternative text. If it's just decorative, it's just there for sighted users to make something interesting about the page. But if your image has pedagogical value, if people are looking at it specifically to learn something from it, then you need to make sure that your alternative text explains that pedagogical value. And then meaningful links. We don't want any URLs because those are really difficult to listen to for people using a screen reader. They're also really difficult to remember for people who are just reading it. And so it's much easier to read, much easier to remember, and it will resonate with them if you use a meaningful link instead of that URL. Last thing on the accessibility list, closed captioning for video. So make sure that if you've used something from YouTube, that it is actually closed captioned and not auto-captioned. Auto-captioned are done through using a computer program with YouTube. They don't have any punctuation, and so it's difficult to understand sentence structure and really, really bad modeling for students who are second language speakers. And in addition, because a computer is the one that is making the closed captions, the type of mistakes they're most likely to make are going to be on specific terms, people's names, dates, and numbers. Those are the ones that are really important for our students, and yet the ones most likely to have the auto captioning make a mistake on. So please make sure that you've checked your captions carefully and that they align with what the person is saying. Okay, so last thing that we need you to do, number 10, is to actually schedule your presentation. And this is really important. The first thing that you're going to do is take the OEI rubric and actually complete a self-check on your course. You need to submit your self-check when you schedule your presentation. You're going to use Confer Zoom or CCC Confer to set up your meeting. And you're going to post the invitation to the meeting, your self-enroll code for your course, and your self-check rubric to the presentation discussion. It's really important to have all three of those in the same place because your course is going to be reviewed by a small team of @ONE and OEI reviewers. And so they'll need that self-enroll code to look at your course. They need your self-check rubric to understand your perspective of your course. And then they need the invitation to the meeting in order to come to your presentation. So I'm going to actually stop the PowerPoint presentation and take you into Confer Zoom and show you how to set up your meeting for those of you that have not used Zoom to actually create a meeting. So you're going to go to Zoom and you're going to sign in. And this is what your meeting schedule is going to look like. So when you sign in, you're here at your profile. And I'm just going to go to schedule a meeting right here. And when I schedule that meeting, it automatically puts in the topic of my meeting. And you don't want it to say my meeting. You'll end up with a lot of meetings that say my meeting if you do that. So what we would like you to do is actually use your last name. And then OESP, so it's easy for us to spot. Presentation is fine. You can enter a description if you like, but it's not necessary. And then you're going to set the date for your presentation. And so you're going to take the time that you signed up for on our Google Doc, and you're actually going to choose the date. The last date you can choose is the 19th. So let's choose April 19th here. And let's pretend that our presentation is at 9 a.m. And you're going to make it an hour and 15 minutes. They don't allow you to choose an hour and 10 minutes, and that's what we told you to do. This so gives you a little bit of wiggle room in case we have a technology problem, and just helps you kind of save your time, the time spot, okay? And then what we would like you to do is don't mark it as required, don't mark it as recurring. Leave those blank. And it doesn't matter to us if your video is off or on when you sign in, although we would like to see you on the video. So at some point we would like you to turn on your video. For audio, you should mark it as both. And then we would like you to mark it as enabled join before host. This will allow us to join the Zoom session before you actually join the Zoom session in case we get there first. It's just a better greeting for people than to give them a warning saying the host isn't in yet, which might make your students nervous. And it's also our way of being able to help you in case you need help, right? So we'd like you to mark that. Other pieces of this are optional. If you're creating this for a really large group, like if you're doing this for your orientation of your class, you might want to mute participants upon entry, which means that if you're already talking and someone comes in 5 minutes late, that they won't make a whole bunch of noise and disrupt your presentation. Okay, so when you're all done choosing those, we'd like you to click Save. When you do that, it will schedule your meeting. You can just give someone this URL if you want. But what we'd like you to do is practice at copying the invitation. So if your students have not used Zoom before, it will give them this full invitation. You select all, and then just Control-C, you can copy it, okay? Okay, so now we're gonna go back to our course, and you'll see in Unit 12, what we have here is a discussion forum specifically to provide access instructions for your final presentation. And when you do that, what we would like you to do is copy and paste that information from your Zoom meeting into this discussion. And what we would really like you to do is then to take this URL right here and make it into a hyperlink. So highlight it and copy it, and then do Command K if you're on a Mac, or Control K if you're on a PC. This window will open. You can put in the URL and then have it open in a new window. You get that little dialog box, Control K or Command K. And then that makes it into a hyperlink. Okay. Now, we don't need this international information, so I'm just going to take the international information out to just give us more space here. So the three things that we asked you for is your self-check rubric as an attachment, so the rubric you've completed about your sandbox, the invitation to your presentation, and then also the self-enroll code from your course. You may have forgotten where that is, so let me show you. This is my sandbox, and I'm going to go here under Settings. And then Course Details. And scroll all the way down to the bottom of Course Details and click on More Options. In this case, I still need to set it for self-enroll. When I update the course, there's my self-enroll code. So I just need this. You can just grab this. So I'm going to go back to that discussion forum, and I'm going to say, now, I want this to be a hot link, right? So I'm just going to go in, I'm going to highlight it and copy it, do Command K or Control K, put in the URL, and new window. Okay. So now, as long as you were doing these, you could have made these meaningful links, by the way. We're going to leave them as just the URL so that people get where they came from, but we could have made them into meaningful links. The last thing I need to do is attach my self-check rubric. So I'm going to click on the paperclip for the attachment and then choose the file. And here's my OEI rubric. And then I'm going to post my reply. So you're welcome to jump into this sandbox, by the way. It's what I fondly call a litter box, not a sandbox. There's a lot of mistakes in it because we play around in it a lot. But if you would like to see what I do in my orientation unit or look through my course, please feel free to go ahead and actually self-enroll in that course and look around. You will see a lot of mistakes because when we're designing courses, the first couple times that we teach the course, there will be design errors, and our students will be very, very quick to point them out. So for instance, I always like to show this one. So the first time I taught this course, which is a writing course with the theme of critiquing Disney, I created a homepage and I talked a little bit about our course and then what we're going to do in the first week, and I provided an orientation video. I was very excited about this, but I thought there was going to be a next button, and it turns out when it's your homepage, it doesn't have a next button. And so my students literally had a dead end. They had no place to go. Okay, so this was the quarter system, so this started very early in January. And I also had another class starting in late January that was a communication course. So learning from my mistake, I said, oh, here, select the next button. Again, no next button because it's the home page, right? So one more design, thinking, okay, I will give them a start here button. I'll create a start here button. But this page is also the very first page in my module. So when they click start here, it took them to the very first page in the module, the same page. So if they see the next button, they can go to next. But if they don't, say when it refreshes, it's like this, they would click start here again. And then they were thinking, I'm trying to start the course, but I can't start the course. Right? So we make design mistakes when we're first teaching. Now I know I can have this as my first page, but when they click start here, it's got to take them to the second page of my module. Otherwise, they're in an infinite loop and they can't get out. So that's something to think about. Another thing to think about is what you're doing with your syllabus page. So in my case, I've used the syllabus page to link them to all of my policies. So there are the policies right there. So every time they land on the syllabus page or come back to the syllabus page, they can check the course summary. These dates haven't been set yet, by the way, so these don't have any dates yet. But they can also connect right to places in the syllabus. So if you look at my modules, in the first module is all of my syllabus broken up into individual content pages. And I still refine this every single time I teach. I'm getting close to what I think is the ideal orientation unit for my class and my teaching style, but I have had to work really hard at creating titles that made sense because I found out that I really loved metaphors. And so my titles didn't make sense when my students were coming back looking for something specifically. We just noticed the other day, some of us were looking at this module, that I don't have textbook information anywhere. It's here under required materials. And so I think I'm going to change this title now to textbook and required materials or something, so that when students are looking for something specific, they can find it. The modules page is almost like a table of contents to your course. And so this allows them to quickly find something in your course. And so think about it that way as well. Have you designed it so that they can find something that they're looking for by going straight to the modules page? So let me talk just a little bit about what you're going to do in your presentation. So the idea is that you're demonstrating that you can put together the beginnings of a course, right? So it's only your orientation and your first content unit. And your content unit might not even be 100% complete. Okay, so for instance, in this particular course, we move week by week. And so each one of the modules is 1 week long. But in my communication course, I do it a little bit differently. So each one of my modules is 3 weeks long. And so at the beginning of the unit, I provide a little video that talks about what we're going to do in the unit and talk about those learning goals for the unit. But the second page is a to-do list. And so it says, this is what we're going to do in week 1. this is what we're going to do in week 2, this is what we're going to do in week 3, and this is when your final project is due. So I kind of provide that blueprint for them to help them understand how I'm using the module. What we want you to do in your presentation is walk us through using the OEI rubric as kind of a backbone for you, or as a starting point. Walk through how you've designed your course. What are your students going to do in the orientation unit? Why have you designed it that way? What are your students going to do in your first content unit, and why have you designed it that way? We'd also like you to keep the @ONE standards in mind while you're presenting. If course design is one aspect of teaching online, the other side of the coin, kind of like the partner to it, is your teaching behavior. So for instance, you can design a beautiful course and teach it poorly. Or you can be a really terrific online teacher and have a really poorly designed course that's going to frustrate students. So we want you to have both sides of that coin. OEI rubric provides the structure to help you understand how to design the course, and the @ONE standards provide the teaching behaviors that will teach you how to teach the course, that will help you teach the course. And so we'd like to hear about both of those while you're presenting. And of course, like any presentation, it's about what you learned through this process. And so we know that you are going to emphasize particular points more than other points. So please just let us know what resonated most with you, what you learned the most in the course, and what you're most proud of as you go through the presentation. You'll want to make sure before your presentation that your portfolio pays attention to the bulleted points of the @ONE standards, and that in your portfolio, you're discussing how you're going to meet those standards in your course. Some of those may still be in the design process, and some of them may need a little bit of polishing, but we just want to be able to see that you're thinking about them. You may not be able to address every single one of them during your presentation. There's 10 standards, that's a lot to go through and show us your sandbox. So you're probably just going to hit the high notes, and that's totally fine. So what you should expect for your presentation is that you'll have 45 minutes to walk us through your sandbox and hit the high points of your portfolio. And then the last 15 minutes you should reserve for question and answer. Because we have multiple presentations, we want you to really pay close attention to time, because people who are viewing your presentation might actually have another presentation or another meeting to go to. And so they'll be in your presentation for just the allotted time, and we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to ask questions before they leave. All right, that's what I have to share with you about the presentation. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.